Hi, I'm Tamsin Relly and we're going to be making some rainbows in the studio today. I'm only going to be using 3 colours and some white, so I'll be touching on some very basic colour theory through the process. So while I've been painting for many years, I find that getting to know the colour spectrum through paint is really an ongoing journey for me, and I feel like there's always more to learn. And I wanted to share 2 aspects about colour or colour theory, which I think are pretty amazing and which have really helped me find my way into colour when it comes to choosing what to work with and how to mix it. So the first is about colour temperatures and thinking about warmer tones and cooler tones. And we're going to explore this by making a rainbow using what are known as colder primary colours. We're also going to take those same 3 colours and learn how to mix a lovely neutral grey from those colours. After that, I want to see how many more colours we can make from the ones we've made for the rainbow. So we're going to do an exercise exploring all the subtler hues that you can make using opposite colours, such as blue and orange, yellow and purple, pink and green. So that'll be learning about complementary opposites. And then after that, you'll have time to do an exercise where you can explore some of your own ideas, experimenting with some of the things that we've touched on in the workshop. So you're going to need some paper, couple of sheets, any size really, but ideally at least 1A3 within that if possible. Preferably some watercolour paper, but thick cartridge is also good, or whatever you have to hand. 2 brushes, 2 jars of water, jug of top-up water, and a bucket to pour your dirty water. A plate or flat palette, kitchen towel, wet cloth and a sponge, and of course some paints. So you'll need a red, blue and yellow for this exercise, and white. I'm going to be demonstrating today with 3 colder primary colours. So I've got with me a magenta, cobalt blue and lemon yellow. But feel free to experiment with whatever you have. And the other thing to mention is that paint colours do actually, the names of them do vary quite widely across different brands and types of paint, so don't worry too much if you can't get the exact ones. Okay, so here comes the theory bit. So just to start at the beginning of it all, these are known as our primary colours, red, blue and yellow. And they are used to mix secondary colours. For example, red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue make green, and red and blue make purple. And when you look at this range, you might easily say that the reds and oranges are the warmer tones, and the blues and greens would be considered the cooler tones. But there's also a subtler way of looking at colour tones, and that is that across the primary colours, which come in a whole range of their own, you get some that might be relatively warmer and others that are relatively cooler. So I've made this poster over here to show those examples. And for instance, you could say that the cold reds, you can tell that they have a little bit more of a blue quality to them, so they're slightly closer to purple or pink. Or on the other hand, a hot blue, you could say, perhaps has a touch more red in it than the cold blues. And equally, if you look at the yellows, this one looks a little bit warmer. So when you're selecting colours for a painting, you might decide to work only with the hot primaries or only with the cool primaries. And that will, if you do that, you'll find there's a sort of natural harmony between all the colours and whatever tones that you mix between them. But of course, you can also mix across both of these ranges, and you'll just get different results for every combination that you make. So there are so many exercises that you can do to get to know all the variables of colours and how to mix them. But I've been doing a simple one in the studio recently just to test out different combinations. So I've been making rainbows using different combination of 3 colours each time. And very quickly, it'll give you a sense of your palette. So for instance, this rainbow is made with the cold primaries and this one's made with the hot primaries. So you can see in both cases, you have a whole different colour range going on. So let's begin. I'm going to use a small piece of paper for my rainbow. Tea break. So this is an optional step. I quite like to wet my paper before making these little things because it gives the colours a chance to bleed into one another, and you can get some nice results. So I've got a sponge. I'm just wetting my paper. You can be quite generous. Whoops. And so now to the rainbow making. So I'm going to put 3 little blobs of each colour on the plate. As I say, I'm demonstrating with 3 examples of cold primaries today: magenta, lemon yellow, and cobalt blue. But you can use whatever you have. I do the 3 dots because you're going to be mixing each colour in between, so it just gives you a chance to keep them quite clean. Some white in the middle. So I do this as well sometimes before starting paintings with more complex compositions as well. Just lay out my palette like this. So I'm going to start with yellow. I'll use the middle one. And I'm going to make a rainbow shape, but you could do any shape you like and still follow the transition of colours. So I'm going to start with yellow line here, and then I'm going to mix some green from my blue and yellow for the green stripe. A rule of thumb is to always mix your stronger or darker colour into the lighter one, and just a tiny bit at a time. That way you can keep more control of what you're mixing. If I had put the yellow into the blue would just keep absorbing the yellow. But here, touch of blue into that yellow till you're happy with your green. And then my green stripe. Moving over to blue. Got a sort of greeny blue over there, so I'm going to put an extra line in. But I also want to see what the pure cobalt looks like, so I'm going to take some of that one. And then you just keep going around your plate. Then mix some purple from your blue and magenta or red. And while you're making your rainbow, you might want to think about if it has a special meaning for you. Obviously, right now, in a way, you can't look at a rainbow without thinking of how it's become a really beautiful symbol of hope and gratitude during COVID-19 for the people working on the front line. But it's such a magical symbol that I think has always caught our imagination and meant hope and possibility for us. So it might also have a personal meaning to you. And it's obviously taken on form for many different movements over the years as well. So I'm moving towards my magenta, and that has a bit of the blue in, so I'm going to put a blob more just so that I can see pure color as well. The fun thing is you hardly even have to, you don't need to change brush or even clean it that much, because you're just transitioning from one color into the next. And now I'm going to make a little orange. So yellow can be quite sensitive to getting mucked up, so I am going to try and clean my brush a bit better this time. And often paint gets caught at the very bottom, so if you're finding your colors getting a bit mucky, then give your brush a really good clean. And I need some fresh magenta. So get this yellow out of here, and the darker color into the lighter. I'm going to come back to the top of my rainbow, do a stripe up there of the orange. And I'm going to put a little line on the bottom as well. Great, so there we have the spectrum of the primary and secondary colors that we can make from the three. And now I'm going to show you my favorite part, actually, which is exploring what kind of gray you can make from these three colors. So if you think of making gray, obviously you can make gray quite simply from mixing black and white, but you can get a whole range of really beautiful grays that might have a hint of color in them, but still be quite neutral. And an example is mixing one from these three colors. So you take a little bit of each, blue, yellow, and magenta, and mix them together with some white. It's one of those things where you could keep mixing for ages, actually, because you'll find at one point the gray is going to err towards more of a yellow or blue or magenta, but you can't really go wrong, because I think it's quite nice to have grays that have hints of those colors in as well. So right now it's quite cool and also quite white, so I'm going to add a little bit more of each. Actually need some more. Oh, well, I can use this. What's left on the plate. There we go. I'm going to add a lot of water. So it's a lovely, slightly greenish grey. Quite a cool grey we have there. I'm just going to paint it around. I find this a really wonderful way of, say I've been working with bright colours in a painting, then just as my palette's starting to get really messy, I start picking some of those lovely greys that come out of it and start working them into the composition. And that way, in a way, it can help ground the brighter colours, and it's a wonderful way of using up your paint and also working in some beautiful neutral tones into your composition. Okay, so there I've seen, all right, that's a little bit the direction it's going to look like when I use those three colors. And in our next exercise, we're going to see, first of all, how many more colors that we can make from those six, as I mentioned, but you'll also find it starts to bring out all the wonderful subtler tones in between those bright ones. Okay, we're moving on to our second exercise. So we need to clean our palette. First thing, it's a shame to waste the paint, but also for the color mixing, when you're doing it, to really see how things are going to come out, you want to start with a very clean palette. Okay, so coming back to our lemon yellow, cobalt and magenta, and I'm actually going to use a slightly different, a slightly lighter magenta because I like it, it's a bit pinker. And as I mentioned before, we're now going to see how many more shades we can make from the ones we mixed previously. So when you think about mixing colors and how to make them lighter or darker, how do we make a color lighter? It's quite simple. You add a bit of white. And to make a color darker, you could also simply add some black. But in a way, it's going to get gray and muddy quite quickly. So there's a brilliant way of muting your color without losing that luminosity. And that is to use the complementary opposite and mix a bit of that in. So just to come back to this image, complementary opposite of red is going to be green, and yellow and purple are opposites, orange and blue are opposites. So we're going to do an exercise mixing those opposite colors from one to the other. Blue to orange, yellow to purple, pink to green. And you're welcome to do, you could choose just one pair and work through that slowly. I'm going to demo all three, but it's up to you, if you'd like to just work through one pair slowly or do all three of them. So I'm going to start with orange and blue. So again, I put 2 little blobs of blue, and we need to mix our orange again. So that's yellow, a bit of this magenta. So make sure your brush is nice and clean. And remember the darker color into the lighter one. A bit of water. I'm not going to wet my page for this one. And I'm going to do, so make sure that you have mixed enough of your second color, so you don't want to run out of it. A little bit more yellow. I'm going to put a blob of that on this side. And I'll take my second brush and put a blob of the complementary opposite on the other side, so you know what you're working towards. And then come back to my orange brush. So we're aiming to get as many shades as we can fit in between here, so easily around 5 or 6 shades. So just add really a tiny touch at a time while you're mixing. So it can be almost imperceptible. There's a little tiny touch of blue. So you want your color still to be orangey, but just not quite as bright. And then a touch more. And at some point, you'll find it really becomes almost a grey between those colours. Before it starts shifting over to the other one. So it's looking a little bit more green. Probably have space for 2 more. Becoming greener. So there's room for 1 more, so we're going to take it close to the blue as we can without being fully blue. So you basically have blue with just a touch of orange. That's a really lovely teal-y colour. Okay. So again, I'm going to clean the palette between before moving on to the next one. Actually got a bit of blue I can leave there. So next I'm going to work with yellow and purple. So your yellow, and then we need to mix purple. So I've left some blue on there, and what else do we need? A bit of the magenta. The darker colour into the lighter. When you're happy with your purple and you have enough, again, we're going to put a blob down on here. And you could make these any shapes that you like. I'm just into the blobs right now. And really nice clean brush for your yellow. On the other side. Bit of water. So I'm going to work from the yellow to the purple because it's subtler. So again, so rather use your yellow brush. If you use your purple brush to mix, it might overwhelm it very quickly. So a little touch of your purple. That could even be too much. Rather start with less because you can always add more. And that makes a really lovely golden yellow. So it's still yellow, but it's just slightly, a little bit muted. Touch more. It's quite a subtle increase, so I'm going to add a little bit more of the purple. More. So again, at some point, it shifts from the yellow tones into the purple tones. Nearly there. So last one, purple that essentially has just a little touch of yellow. So you get some lovely dusty pinks over here. Okay. Clean brushes. So when you're mixing colours, it's really important to keep your brushes and water clean. So this is getting a little bit dirty. I'm going to tip it out there and top up. Okay, so what have we got left is magenta and green. So our red and green. clean the plate again. It's fine. And so we need to mix green, yellow and blue. On the other side, our red equivalent, which is this magenta. So a bit of the darker colour into the lighter. Put our secondary colour down here, the green, and our magenta there. And then once again, touch of this one into that. Oh, I've added a bit much. A little bit more. What you might find across the middle of your page is some similar tones start to emerge. Because in a way, all of these, they all have all three colours in them in different quantities. And a little bit more pink. There we go. So there we've created a whole lot of new tones between these ones. And as I did with the last one, I'm going to mix a little grey to put around the outside. So a bit of each. So more blue. So I used to buy a lot more of a range of tubes of paint, but slowly over the years, as I've learned how to mix different tones, I, in a way, can keep a much more reduced paint box. So once you see how many you can do from just 3 colours, you can keep your supplies a lot simpler and not have to rely on the ready mixed colours. I also find that colour is just this really mysterious language that kind of keeps on unveiling itself, and even now I still come across a colour and think, oh wow, you're so beautiful, how can I have overlooked you all this time? Yeah, it's hard to hold them all in your mind at once ever. Okay, there are little colour eggs. Okay, so for our third exercise, I thought it would be nice to give you a chance to interpret anything that we've explored in the other exercises and see, bring your own ideas into it. You may also, if you have other colours to hand, you might want to try out making a hot rainbow, or maybe you want to invent a rainbow using your all-time favourite colours, or just use two colours and see how many really subtle tones you can get between them, and extend it on the other side, slowly adding bits of white, or make an entirely new shape, playing with colour tones as you go. It's totally up to you. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use up what's on the end of this palette and try and make a composition from that. So I'm going to wet my page again. And I'm really excited by all the in-between colours that you get, as I mentioned earlier, once your palette's a bit worn in. So I'm just going to play with these. Maybe do some entirely new shapes. So there's some lovely greys coming out. Really bluey grey here. This one's a little bit greener. So I still only have all my cool primaries on this plate. And because they have that harmony together, you can really make a mess of things and still come out with quite a lovely palette. If you compare this to the first rainbow we did, in a way I'm using more of the muted tones in this composition. All the tones that perhaps would have come out of this exercise here. You can really feel quite free. Lovely grey-green here. My strange blobby composition. Looking at this, I do feel like I want a little bit of a punch, so I'm going to try and bring some yellow back. You can also, what I often do when I make a painting is perhaps work with that restricted palette just to the very end, and then I'll stand back and look at it and decide if there are other elements that I want to bring in. And I even, these days, instead of arranging my paints, I used to arrange them yellows, blues, greens. Now, because I'm so taken by these hot-cold tones, I arrange the cool and hot colours before beginning a work, and then usually start with one trio or the other. And for a last swirl, just mix it all up. Lucky Packet colour. Nice plastery kind of grey has come out of that. Okay. Yeah, so the end of that you should have your rainbow exploring the basic mixtures, and then all the subtle hues in between, mixing complementary colors, and then your experiment at the end. Yeah, so thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed the workshop. I know that can be a lot to take in, but I hope it would have left you with a few seeds of ideas that you can keep working with and keep experimenting with. Thanks.